Hello everyone, this is Zagany333. And this movie review is Dracula Untold. But first, I thought I'd show off this cool shirt. Not really show it off, but trust in God and it's fucking Cthulhu. Yeah, I just thought this shirt and then that other one with the shark and stuff were pretty cool, so I thought I would show it off. It says Stephen Rhodes, I guess, is the creator and stuff, or, the person who made these shirts. Gotta say, awesome fucking designs. And let me show this, because it's been a long time since I've actually showed a case to one of the DVDs and stuff. But I thought this one was definitely one I should remember to do so, because look at the cool artwork. Absolutely love it, and it's a steel case. And that's one of the things that I'll, let me see, actually, is it backwards or, fuck. I don't know, this whole camera setup thing has, not exactly confused, but yeah, since it's backwards, it's whatever. But yeah, I thought I would show that because it's been a long time since I've done so. And that will be one of the positive things that I end up mentioning when it comes to this film, Dracula Untold. But what is this fucking awesome film about? Well, pretty much it is about Vlad the Impaler and, his kingdom and whatever kind of deal. And pretty much when another opposing force comes to take his son away as well as 1,000 other children from this kingdom, all-out war breaks out pretty much when he tries to oppose them. But since he doesn't have exactly, the strength, the manpower, the amount to be able to take them on, what he ends up doing is having to go to a hidden sort of, cave where there is a vampire dwelling. Pretty much, I think, the, origin of what is, the vampiric race and stuff like that. And he pretty much makes a deal with this vampire that if for 3 days he can go without feeding, he can use some of those powers after drinking this vampire's blood. And he can use that to try to defeat this opposing force. But if he drinks and feeds within those 3 days, then he'll be stuck basically an undead vampire forever. And so that's the pretty much basic story of it. There's more to it than that, but I don't need to really go into much. And speaking of which, this is actually a review. I may not even have really any spoilers, if not maybe one or something like that. Much of what I'm going to be talking about, to be honest with you, is actually gripes. But there will be positives too. But this movie was made in 2014. It is PG-13, and it is 1 hour and 32 fucking minutes. And this is the first thing that I thought I would put here. And I don't know, people are probably going to have differing opinions and all that. And speaking of, in the last review I mentioned I was thirsty and fucking drinking energy drinks here. Which goes well with this, since this, has to do with drinking blood and shit, right? Anyway, the first point that I thought I'd put here is this actually was a film that I was incredibly hyped for before its release. This kind of came out around the time where I was really getting into Castlevania, rediscovering that since my childhood, and really getting into the Castlevania games and stuff that has to do with vampires, the original kind of Dracula and all that cool stuff like that. And so when this was supposed to come out, I was incredibly excited, as well as hearing about the Universal monster movie kind of Dark Universe reboot thing, which I still think that would have been an awesome idea. It didn't really pan out very much, but still sounds like an awesome fucking amazing idea, because I've always liked, those monster movies, any kind of horror movies like that, the original ones, as well as, like Suicide Squad and things having to do with more of a villainous kind of side rather than always heroes and stuff. So I thought that was a cool idea, but sadly didn't pan out. But this is the thing, when it finally released and I finally watched it, I was incredibly hyped and excited. And sadly, I would say that this is a film that while it was a good film, it wasn't a great film. And so thus it kind of disappointed me. And here come the reasons for why that is. And the first point that I put here was that it's PG-13, when in my opinion, it should have been an R-rated movie. And the reason for that is, we're talking about Dracula. We're talking about fucking vampires. We're talking about Vlad the Impaler here. Yet this movie's PG-13 and really has almost hardly any blood to speak of, hardly any gore. And, while the fights are well done and cool, like I said, there is almost no blood and there's almost no gore to almost any of it. And while that can work for quite a lot of films. Like, remember when I reviewed Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? That's PG-13, succeeded. But the problem is, in my opinion, that was a, set of stories and a horror movie that makes sense being tailored to a PG-13 audience, or, that kind of category. Whereas Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, and vampires is something that, to me anyways, is in the realm of rated R and excessive blood, excessive violence, excessive gore, fucking carnage, fucking menacing, crazy, awesome, badass shit like that. And so to me, when they made this a PG-13 film, they made it too tame. They toned it way too down. And that's what I feel like one of the big gripes for me anyways is, while those fights are cool, while a lot of this film is actually good, to me, that's one of the things that kind of holds this film and stops it from going from a good category film to a great category film. And yeah, the second point here that I put was, it was one I was very hyped for, but disappointed upon its release and watching it. As I grab me another cigarette. All right. And here's another thing that I thought I'd put here, though. And I probably should have checked this, because the name of this game in particular seems to baffle me at times. But this definitely reminded me of Castlevania Lords of Shadow, or Lord of Shadows. Like I said, that name baffles me. I seem to always forget if it's Lord of Shadows or Lords of Shadow. But I think it's Lords of Shadow. Any fucking way. It really reminded me of that game. And that's one thing I gotta say. I love the Castlevania games, fucking all of them that I've played. Even the ones that were heavily critiqued. One of them being the Castlevania Lords of Shadow game. That and its sequel. And whereas most people that are Castlevania fans tend to not really like that one because they feel like it borrows too much from God of War gameplay-wise and stuff like that, to me, I was able to look past those gripes and those things and see it for the fucking absolute masterpiece that it is, because to me, that's like a 10 fucking game right there. The storytelling in that game is just fucking great. Absolutely great. And this film seems to sort of kind of try to draw inspiration from, or kind of really go with the story that's established in that game. Problem being, though, which we'll be getting into, is it doesn't live up to that. But that's another thing I thought I'd mention, is if you do like this film, if you like Castlevania, absolutely check out Castlevania Lords of Shadow. To me, you will not be disappointed. It's a fucking amazing game that's underrated as hell in the whole series. Can't speak for much for its sequel, because sadly I haven't played it yet. But yeah, it's a fucking great game. And the other thing that I put here is what I also feel like would beat this film isn't just the game that I just mentioned, but also the Castlevania show. Because the Castlevania show, it has the vampires, it has great storytelling, but it also has the blood and gore that to me should go along with something themed like this. As well as even Game of Thrones. I mean, that's the other thing I put down here, is to me, that's what keeps this from being great. It's good, but it's not great because of other ones like Castlevania Lords of Shadow, because of the Castlevania show, because of Game of Thrones, and because of other, Dracula-inspired, vampire-inspired stories that actually deliver on that, as well as other things like that. There's so many other things that surpass this film, and that's why, to me, it kind of lessens it to just a good film. But here's another thing. This was one of the positives, because I've been kind of bitching right now, haven't I? So the positives are, there is great visuals. The visuals are fucking awesome in this. The style is really awesome in this. And the story is great in this too. And even the fighting. And even the acting is pretty damn good. So, I mean, all of those things are great. But, like I said, the big gripe for me is when they lessened it to PG-13 and they basically sedated or numbed or watered this down and made it too tame. That took a little bit from what should have been there, as well as the next point that I'm about to get into, which is I don't honestly believe that, this film didn't receive enough of a runtime. This film's an hour and 32 minutes, okay? Whereas Castlevania Lords of Shadow is quite a long game to tell its story, but that's what makes it succeed. It takes its time, and it really sets up for the emotional moments in that story. Whereas this film, it's trying to tell a similar story, but it's only got an hour and 32 minutes to do that. And while it does well at telling the story, I feel like this film definitely would have benefited from an extra half hour or even an hour more to build up those characters more, maybe more fights with that added blood, or more story to make it even more impactful later on. To me, the story kind of felt rushed just a little bit. And so that kind of lessened the emotional impact of the story. That's just another point there. So to me, that is the two big things that I feel like really held this film back from its potential of being a fucking really great film. It was the PG-13 rating and toning down some of those, violent things that to me are kind of warranted with the territory of vampires and all this horror kind of stuff, as well as a reduced runtime that could have went to even bettering the story that much more. But the last point I put here is, despite the negativities that I continue to bring up and bitch about, it is a good film, just not a great film. And there's another thing also, is that this actually was supposed to be the first part of, like I mentioned, the Universal monster movies, a kind of dark universe kind of thing. So they actually planned a sequel to this to be made. And that's another thing that I put here is, it's a shame that the sequel wasn't made, because this was a great film, not a great film, a good film. So it would have been awesome to see that sequel. But that's the sad shame that we have here, is the potential, it went from, instead of being this great, amazing film that it could have been, to only being kind of a good almost there. Like I said, the PG-13 been increased to an R, adding those things, as well as some extra runtime to give the story its total due, and more of that emotional impact there. And it absolutely could have been a great, really high-ranking, film, in my opinion. So the score I thought I would give this film is a 7.5, kind of heading towards 8. And to me, if it would have added those other things, like that rated R rating, as well as the extra time to maybe really give the story its most, it could have probably easily been past that 8, maybe to 8.5 or even 9, or, even higher than that, because it could have had the potential to be a really awesome fucking film. Still is good, but just not as good as it could have been, sadly. But okay, I guess maybe I may mention one spoiler, I suppose. So for any of you guys who want to maybe check this film out, or you're done, fucking peace. And for the rest who might want to hear like one spoiler or some extra thoughts when it comes to this game, and maybe also Castlevania Lords of Shadow, stick around, but keep in mind I may be spoiling that game as well. But alright, so what extra things do I feel like saying here? Well, I feel like I said, the story was pretty good. It covered a lot of things, including the kind of tragedy that comes very later on in the film, when in this film, he loses his wife pretty much and ends up having to feast on her blood to become, a full-on vampire to save their son and all that. It was handled well, it was handled good, but that's kind of at least goes to my point where I said extra runtime I think would have helped a little bit more on that. Because while it still was emotional and it was still pretty well done in that aspect, if you've played through Castlevania Lords of Shadow, you probably know what I mean. All of that build-up through the story before, and I really hope you guys have played through that, because I really don't want to spoil the storytelling in that game. But a similar thing happens in that game. I'll just leave it at that. But it's executed so much more and is that much more emotional in that game because of the time it took to really make you want to see a good resolution to the story and have an outcome similar to that. It's a lot, to me anyways, when I compared the two, when I played through the game, it blew my mind. It was a really, really sad moment in the game. Whereas when it comes to this movie, it was sad, but not nearly as sad, because you didn't get enough time with all these characters, with the main character. You didn't get time to really feel the love aspect of the relationship, to make it as much of a tragedy as it could have been. And so that's why I mentioned, an extra half hour, or an extra hour with maybe other story elements, things thrown in. This could have really, pushed its impact and its storytelling capabilities there. As well as, like I also mentioned, the whole aspect of blood and stuff, because I really don't get that. I mean, maybe it's because, those older films, when you think about them, I mean, those are films you could show a PG-13 audience. That's probably why they toned it down, is they wanted to try to keep it to where it is easily accessible. But in my opinion, in trying to keep it where it's easily accessible, they kind of missed out on something that could have given this film much more intensity as well and much more excitement as well. But okay, I guess that's the last, few things I was going to say. But I hope that you guys have a dark-filled day. And by that I mean a good day, like the kind of dark that I like, where it's raining and but it's relaxing and it's horror-filled, metal-filled, badass as fuck. I hope you have that kind of day, an awesome, kick-ass, amazing one. And I will see you guys in the next awesome movie review that I do. Have a wonderfully amazing, fucking badass day. Peace, guys. See ya.